9/11 was a Tuesday morning. It was before I came to Congress. I hadn't been elected to Congress yet. I was working as an orthopedic surgeon in my office, and I was seeing patients early that day. I had surgery that afternoon, and so I was seeing patients early that day, and the nurse who was helping me, I remember, knocked on the door and said, "You've got to come see this." And we had a television in our waiting room, and walked out and looked at the television, and the first plane had hit the first tower, and at that time we didn't know what it was. In fact, the folks on television were telling us it was probably an accident. So I went back to work, continued seeing patients, and not long after that, minutes after that, really, there was another knock on the exam room door, and the nurse came in and said, "You've got to come see this." And I went out and saw that there was a second plane that had hit the second tower, and the smoke rising from the towers, and you just sensed that something was just terribly wrong, and there was beginning to be a narrative that was building about an attack occurring. But I had patients to see. I went back to work, and not long after that, another knock on the door, and kind of the nurse coming and looking as I'd never seen her before, and she and I had worked together for almost 20 years, and she said, "You've got to look at this," and came out, and everybody in the waiting room was gathered around the television and seeing that a plane had hit the Pentagon, and I just felt that awful feeling in the pit of my stomach that I'll never forget. Well, the immediate thoughts were, what on earth is going on? There really wasn't, in real time, we didn't know what the extent of the damage was, what the extent of the attack was. You have to remember that this became, over about an hour period of time, clear that it was an act of war, that the United States was being attacked from somewhere. Nobody knew where. And so the people began to think, well, what do I have to do? Should I go get my kids from school? Do I have to come home from work? Do we stop work? What is it that we do? And so the immediate thought was how do we make certain that we're safe, that our co-workers are safe, that our family's safe, that our community is as safe as it can be. Well, 9/11 certainly changed all of us on that day who experienced it, because we felt a vulnerability that for most of us we had never experienced. The United States hadn't been attacked like this on our homeland since Pearl Harbor. And so there was a vulnerability that we all experienced, and in that vulnerability we came together as a nation, again, like I had never experienced. Regardless of background, regardless of age, regardless of political perspective, we came together and felt a sense of patriotism and a sense of unity that many of us hadn't felt in a long time, and that was uplifting. It really was. It was kind of how we joined arms together to get through this. Then you began to hear stories about the people who had the incredible challenges on that day, and the first responders who lost their lives running into the buildings, and the incredible heroism of Flight 93, and the remarkable hospitality and warmth of the people of Newfoundland who took Americans in. And many of those folks who were taken in were members of our own community. So you began to get a sense that the nation was pulling together. But it's changed us all. It's changed us, again, not just from a sense of vulnerability, but a sense of priority. What is it that we need to do as a nation to make certain that that kind of evil will never visit our homeland again? But I think also it's changed us in a way that's difficult to describe because of the sense of growing apart that we've had over the last 15 years, and that longing for that sense of unity that occurred on that day and certainly during that week.